Right. Have you ever,
Yeah.
like, I don't know, ever wished your doctor could just kind of, give you a sneak peek into your future health,
Yeah.
like right then and there?
Oh, tell me more. What do you mean?
I mean, wouldn't it be wild if they could tell you right there in the ER, like, hey, looks like you're in for a long stay, or even, uh-oh, you might need the ICU.
Hmm. Yeah, that would be something else.
Right. It sounds kind of sci-fi, but a new AI system, it's called ARACE. It's promising that kind of prediction power.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that's exactly what we're diving deep into today. We've got this super interesting research paper, brand new, hot off the press, and it walks us through how this whole ARACE system was developed and tested.
That's fascinating. And this paper isn't just about some flashy new tech. It actually digs into a really big problem that's been plaguing healthcare.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
Well, it's the fact that hospitals, they really struggle to accurately predict critical outcomes for patients. Like, will they die? Will they need the ICU? How long will they even be in the hospital?
You're right. I never really thought about it like that. But yeah, those are big questions.
They are. And if hospitals can't predict these things well, it makes it so much harder to provide efficient care, right?
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Think of it like a restaurant, say, trying to run a restaurant without knowing how many people are coming for dinner.
Oh, right. I see what you mean.
Total chaos. You end up wasting food or turning people away.
Perfect analogy, yeah.
And the paper, it points out that the tools that hospitals currently use for these predictions, things like the new WS and mu-WS scores, they relied on these fixed variables.
Yeah.
So they aren't very adaptable.
So they're like using a one-size-fits-all approach when clearly each patient is totally unique.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay, so how does ARES, this supposedly revolutionary AI, how does it change things up?
Well, ARES is actually built on top of another AI model called ETHOS.
Oh boy, more acronyms. I'm already getting lost.
I know, healthcare loves their acronyms, but don't worry, this one is pretty cool. ETHOS stands for Enhanced Transformer for Health Outcome Simulation.
Enhanced Transformer for Health Outcome Simulation.
Yeah, see? That's why I just say ETHOS. But think of it. Think of ETHOS like a time machine for your health. It takes all of your past medical history, everything, and it uses it to create this timeline.
Okay, I'm following so far a health timeline.
But here's the mind-blowing part. ETHOS, it doesn't just stop there. It takes that timeline and projects what your future health timeline might look like.
Well, wait a second. So it's like predicting what might happen to my health based on what's already happened.
Exactly. And that's where ARES comes in, using those predictions from ETHOS. It takes those predictions and calculates the probabilities, like how likely are specific events to happen. Things like needing the ICU or having a longer than average hospital stay.
So this ethos, it's not just some magic crystal ball, right? Like how does it actually create these predictions?
Well, it all comes down to, you guessed it, data. ETHOS has been trained on this absolutely massive data set. I'm talking millions and millions of electronic health records, millions of patient timelines.
Wow.
It's like it's read the medical history of, well, millions of people and learned to spot patterns that we humans, we just might miss.
So it's almost like having this super smart doctor, one who's seen it all and can use that experience to kind of make these educated guesses about what might happen to you.
I love that way of putting it. And what's even cooler, ARES doesn't just give you this like static probability, this one number. It's constantly being updated. As new information about you becomes available, it recalculates, so your lab results come back or your vital signs change. ARES is right there with you, adjusting its calculations in real time.
Oh, wow. I can see how that would be incredibly useful, especially in a super fast-paced environment like the ER.
Absolutely. You need information fast, and ARES is all about speed. But these researchers, they didn't just stop at developing the system. They really wanted to test it out, see how it performed in the real world.
So they put it to the test.
They sure did. They used a database of real patient records. It's called ME-IMI-FI. Huge database, nearly 300,000 patients to be exact.
Wow. Okay, so they compared ARES to those traditional methods, those new Ws and UW scores, and to other machine learning models too.
Exactly. Head to head.
All right, so drum roll, please. How did it do?
ARES absolutely crushed it. It significantly outperformed all the other methods on every single test.
Wow. Color me impressed. But let's be honest, a lot of impressive tech can be a bit of a black box.
Oh, you mean we don't always understand how it works or why it's making certain predictions?
Exactly, and that can be a little unnerving, right?
Totally valid concern. But ARES, that's what makes it so exciting. It's not just about spitting out numbers. It actually gives you insights into why it made a certain prediction.
Okay, so like it can point to specific things in your medical history that are like red flags influencing your risk.
Precisely. Imagine your doctor saying, okay, based on your past history of X, Y, and Z, ARES is predicting you have a slightly higher risk of needing the ICU during this hospital stay. See? It's about giving doctors more information so they can make the absolute best possible decisions.
I see. That level of transparency, yeah, that definitely could help build trust, not just blindly trusting a machine, right? But it makes me wonder, how might patients feel knowing an AI is weighing in on their care? I mean, some people might be excited, personalized predictions and all, but others might be a little skeptical, maybe even scared.
You've hit on a really key point. The psychological impact of this technology, it's something we absolutely need to consider. But, before we get too deep into the philosophical implications, what if we break down some of ARES's performance stats?
Okay, yeah, let's get into those numbers.
So when predicting hospital mortality, ARES got an AUC score of, get this, 0.936.
Okay, stats whiz over here, but for the rest of us who need a refresher, what's that AUC score telling us?
Basically, how good a model is at telling two groups apart. In this case, patients who will, sadly, die during their hospital stay and those who won't.
Okay, I'm with you.
So a perfect prediction would have an AUC of 1.U, right? And point 0.5, well, that's basically just a coin toss.
Got it. So 0.936 is pretty darn good.
It is. And for predicting ICU admissions, it did almost as well, AUC of 0.927.
So significantly better than chance. That's a huge improvement over the traditional methods. Did they look at how ARIES perform for different groups of patients, different demographics?
Yes, absolutely. And, this is super important when we talk about making sure healthcare is truly equitable for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So they analyzed how well ARIES performed across different racial and ethnic groups.
Were there any big differences?
Okay, get this. ARIES actually performed better for some groups that historically haven't always been well served by the healthcare system.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Which groups specifically?
The most improvement in accuracy was seen for Asian and Hispanic patients.
Oh, wow, that's great. So ARIES is not only more accurate overall, but it's actually helping to close that gap in healthcare outcomes between different groups. That's a big deal.
Absolutely huge. But accuracy, that's just one piece of the puzzle. We also need to know if these predictions are reliable. Like, how trustworthy are they?
Right, because if ARIES tells you there's a 30% chance you'll need the ICU, does that actually mean anything? Does it line up with what really happened?
Exactly. That's where calibration comes in. It tells us how well those predicted probabilities match up with what actually happens.
Okay, so big question. Did ARIES pass the calibration test?
With flying colors, especially for those, the most critical outcomes, things like death and ICU admissions, the probabilities, they were very well calibrated.
Okay, so we've got accurate, we've got reliable, and potentially even more equitable than what we're using now. This really does sound like it could change healthcare as we know it.
It really does have that potential. But, like with any new technology, there are some questions and things we need to think about carefully.
Oh, for sure. Like, what does this mean for the relationship between doctors and patients, right? If an AI is weighing in, predicting your health future, does that change how you listen to your doctor's advice? Do you trust it more? Or could it even lead to, more anxiety and fear for patients?
Those are all really valid concerns, and, there are even bigger questions about the optics of using AI in healthcare in general. But let's hold on to those thoughts for a bit and maybe shift gears a little. What if we explore some of the specific ways ARIES could be used in different parts of the hospital? I think that's where things will really get interesting for our listeners.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. How could ARIES actually be used in a real hospital setting? I'm picturing a busy ER, doctors and nurses running around like crazy.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely high pressure. Every second counts.
So how could ARIES, how could it actually help in that kind of environment?
Well, imagine this. ARIES is used right there at triage. When a patient first walks in the door, boom, instant risk assessment. It could flag patients who, might be more likely to have something serious going on, might need attention right away.
I see. So it's like an extra set of eyes, a safety net to catch those patients that might otherwise, slip through the cracks.
Exactly. And because ARIES is always updating those predictions, right? As new information comes in, the risk assessments become even more accurate over time.
So even if a patient seems fine at first, ARIES could still pick up on those subtle changes, the ones that might indicate a higher risk of complications later on.
That's the idea. It's all about being proactive, helping doctors intervene earlier so we can, hopefully prevent those worst case scenarios.
This is really making sense for the ER. But what about other parts of the hospital, like, say, the general medical floors? Could ARIES be used there too?
Absolutely. I mean, one area where ARIES could be a total game changer is in predicting which patients are at higher risk of being readmitted after they're discharged.
Oh, right. Readmissions. Those are a big problem, right? I mean, for the healthcare system, but also for patients. It's disruptive, it's expensive.
They are, and a lot of the time, they are preventable, too. So ARIES, it could help doctors identify those patients who might need just a little extra support after they leave.
Oh.
Maybe they need a follow-up appointment a little sooner, or, maybe a home health visit would be really helpful.
So it's not just about predicting bad stuff. It's about using those predictions to guide care and hopefully avoid those bad things from happening in the first place.
Exactly. I love that. It really highlights how ARIES could be, it's not just about prediction, it's a tool for care coordination.
Yeah.
It helps hospitals make sure patients are getting the right care at the right time, whether it's in the hospital or even after they've gone home.
I mean, I'm really starting to see how this could totally change the whole healthcare landscape.
Yeah.
But I can't help but wonder how patients will feel about this, about an AI being part of their care.
Oh, for sure.
Some people, they might be super excited about this idea of, personalized predictions, but others might be a little wary, maybe even scared.
Yeah, I think that's a completely normal reaction. And it all boils down to transparency. Patients need to know how ARIES works, what data is it using, and what do those predictions actually mean for them.
Yeah, totally. It can't be about replacing doctors with AI.
Right. No way.
It's about giving doctors another tool to help them make better decisions.
That's it. And I think it's also super important to emphasize that ARIES isn't making the final call,
Right.
It's providing information. The ultimate decision, that always rests with the doctor and the patient together.
This all sounds really, really promising, but I also know, any new technology, even with the best intentions, you can have unintended consequences.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Are there potential downsides or risks that we should be thinking about with ARIES?
Absolutely. Nothing's perfect, right?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, one that comes to mind is that advice could potentially lead to, overtreatment.
Okay. How so?
Well, say a patient is told they have a higher risk of, developing a certain condition. They might start, putting pressure on their doctor
Oh, right, I see.
to order more tests, maybe procedures that they don't really need.
That makes sense, yeah. And I guess on the flip side, some patients, if they hear they have a high risk of something, they might just kind of, give up,
Oh, yeah.
get fatalistic, like, well, there's nothing I could do anyway.
You're right. That's definitely a valid concern. And it highlights how important it is to frame this information in a way that, empowers patients instead of scaring them.
Mhm.
Doctors, they're going to need training, right? To learn how to communicate risk effectively. Patients need to understand that, look, these predictions, they're not a guarantee. They're just a tool, a way to help guide those tough decisions.
You've raised some really, really important points, and it's clear that, implementing this kind of technology responsibly is going to take a lot of planning and careful consideration.
Yeah.
But before we get too bogged down in the potential pitfalls, let's get back to the exciting stuff.
I agree.
I mean, these researchers, they've got some pretty ambitious plans for the future of Ares, right?
They do. It's going to be interesting to see what they come up with.
Okay, so we've talked about how this Ares system works, how it stacks up against what's already out there, but what about, the future?
Right.
I feel like this is just scratching the surface of what AI can really do in healthcare.
You're absolutely right. The researchers behind Ares, they've got some really ambitious goals, some big plans moving forward.
Oh, yeah, like what?
Right now, it's mostly focused on predicting those acute events that happen in the hospital setting, but they're thinking bigger.
Okay.
They want a system that can predict a whole range of health outcomes.
So not just like, will I need the ICU, but maybe my risk for, developing heart disease or diabetes years from now.
Exactly. And to get there, they're thinking about incorporating a lot more data, way more than just electronic health records.
Oh, like what?
I'm talking radiology images, genetic information, even data from those wearable devices everyone's got these days.
Wait, hold on a second. So ARIS could be analyzing my DNA, my latest MRI, and even like how many steps I take in a day.
It sounds a little crazy, right?
Yeah.
But that's where things are heading.
Wow.
The idea is to get this complete picture of your health using all that data to make the most accurate and personalized predictions possible.
I gotta admit, part of me is kind of freaked out by just how much data we're talking about, but another part of me, I'm really intrigued.
I get it. It's a lot to take in.
It feels like we could personalize care in a way that's never been possible before.
Absolutely. But we got to be smart about it.
Yeah.
Balance those privacy concerns with the incredible potential this tech has.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say, hypothetically they pull it off, they get all this data into Ares.
All right.
What would that even mean for the average person? Like, how would it actually change lives?
Well, imagine a world where your doctor can sit down with you and say, all right, based on everything we know about you, here's your risk of developing certain diseases.
Wow.
And they can tell you this years, maybe even decades before any symptoms show up.
It's like having a crystal ball for your health.
In a way, yeah.
I mean, that knowledge, that's powerful.
It is. It gives you the power to take action. You can make changes to your lifestyle, diet, exercise. You can get regular screenings, maybe even start preventative treatments.
So it's not just about waiting for something bad to happen.
Exactly.
It's about taking control, managing your health proactively.
That's the goal. Empower people, help them feel like they're in the driver's seat when it comes to their health.
But that makes me think, what about those folks who maybe don't have the resources to access those things, those preventative measures? Healthcare is already so unequal. Could this make things worse? Widen the gap between those who have and those who don't?
That's a really important question, and it's one that the researchers are really thinking about too. They're adamant that this technology, it needs to be accessible for everyone.
Yeah.
It can't just be a fancy tool for the wealthy.
Right. It needs to be a force for equity in healthcare.
Exactly, and that's going to take a lot of work. Policymakers, healthcare providers, tech developers, everyone needs to be on board to make sure these AI systems are implemented the right way.
So it sounds like a lot of work ahead, but the potential payoff, I mean, it's huge.
Oh, it is. It's massive. This research, I think it gives us a glimpse into the future. A future where AI isn't just, some tool for doctors. It's actually a partner in our own personal health journeys.
A future where we're all a little more informed, a little more in control, and hopefully, living longer, healthier lives.
That's the dream, right?
Well, listeners, that about wraps up our deep dive into ARES, the Adaptive Risk Estimation System. We've seen what this tech can do, explored some of the exciting possibilities, and talked about some of the challenges too.
And as always, we encourage you to dive deeper. Check out the full research paper for yourself. We'll put a link in the show notes.
As we enter this new world, this world of AI-driven healthcare, it's important to stay curious, but also keep asking those tough questions. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
No